Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Calm Balm Podcast. I'm your host, career confidant Raquel Sands. I'm joined today by Vicky Kelty. Hi, hi, from Spain or from USA to Spain. Where is geography? I'm so happy to have her. We met during a career business pop-up network. And yeah, we're going to talk today all about business, career, how we got into this line of work, what we're doing. And yeah, so happy to have you, Vicky. Please introduce yourself to the podcast land.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Raquel. And I'm an online English teacher, and as you said, I'm from Nebraska, but I live in Spain. So I have the best of both worlds. I like to think of it as.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I should have said, I'm so sorry. I got caught up with our whole the geography.
The excitement.
Excitement. Yes. You are an American English teacher living in Spain. She helps people feel confident in everyday English conversations, whether at work, with friends, while traveling, no matter where you live, which I think is awesome because English is such an interesting language. It has a lot of nuance. It has a lot of, but even as a Spanish speaker, there's some things I do love about English. There's no gender things with like nouns. It's just some things are straightforward. You can add languages into English that I feel like other languages don't. So I love that because English I feel like is a very universal language.
I mean, what could I say except for I also love it. So I agree with you across the board.
No, yes. And so my first question that I ask to all my guests is, what is one piece of media, so a book, a show, a movie, whatever it is, that has changed or shaped your life in some way? Hopefully in a positive way, but yeah.
Well, so when I was thinking about how to respond to this question, I was thinking, okay, well, everybody that knows me knows that I am obsessed with the TV show Friends. And so they might think, oh, well, this is what she's going to say. I mean, I'm wearing a Friends t-shirt right now, but that actually isn't my answer. And then people might think, okay, well, she's also really obsessed with Stephen King. She's read a lot of Stephen King books. So that's going to be her answer if she doesn't say Friends. But neither of those are my answers.
Man.
I'm throwing a curveball. And I realized that the thing that I would say like most impacted me, and yes, in a positive way, was this book that I actually have with me. It's The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And pardon my pronunciation of his name because I'm not exactly sure how you say it, but I do my best.
Yes.
And I first came across this book when I lived in Costa Rica. It was recommended to a friend of mine and she told us about it. And I was like, oh, I must read this book. And so I bought it in Spanish. It's like the first book that I bought in Spanish. And so I bought a huge copy of it with pictures and all of this. And it sits in Nebraska. So every time I go back to Nebraska, I get to have that book there. And it's just a reminder of like the first book that I got in Spanish, which, reading in another language is really significant.
Yes.
Because it's a form of communication to read in the language and to speak the language. But that was really meaningful.
My gosh.
But there's so much more because when I was traveling in Germany many years ago, I was just, I don't know, I felt like a bit lost. And lost literally, but
Okay.
also lost. It's lost in Germany.
Yeah.
But lost also like just didn't know what was going to happen with my life. And
Yeah.
I think it was at the train station and this name I'm not going to say right, but it's like Aachen, Germany, something like that. It's Achen. I think it's how
Worse.
I have the spelling in the book because I still have Aachen. And this English version of The Alchemist was in that bookstore, and it had like this little bit of damage on the front. And I asked them, "Do you have another copy?" And they said, "Nope, it's this one or none." And I said, "Okay, it's this one."
Yeah.
And I took it and I started reading it again. And I felt like it was just the universe saying, you need to read this again, Vicky.
Again.
You need to get something new from it.
Yeah.
And so I went through it before this call and I was looking at, because I haven't read it in a number of years.
Yeah.
And I was looking at some of the things that I had underlined.
Oh my
and I was like, these are not what I thought I would have had underlined. Because it's just like every time I read it, it speaks to me in a different way, depending on where I'm at with my life.
100%. Oh my gosh.
Right.
Well, I feel like you're also speaking to me because this is also the second time I see this book in like 2 months. So I feel like it's a sign. Oh my
Have you read it?
I've read it,
Okay.
but it's been forever ago. I don't even think I remembered the story. Besides, he goes on this journey. It's like a metaphysical journey. It's also a physical journey. But yeah, I mean,
I would.
So how did it impact you? Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I'll share 2 quotes from it.
Okay.
And this will answer that question a bit.
Okay.
Actually.
Yes. No, you're good.
In my little sticky notes, I put little cat and panda sticky notes, but one of them has moved. Okay. So this quote, I feel like anybody who's read The Alchemist, this is like one of the quotes that everybody always says. Okay. And it's, when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it.
Yeah.
Then today, when I was looking through and I found something underlined, it said, there is a force that wants you to realize your destiny. It whets your appetite with a taste of success. And I was like, it's the same quote. Like, I mean, it's the same idea, but it's just with that little nuance of you're given a little bit of it to say like, this is what you want, right? Here's a taste of it. Yeah. You want a little more? You want a little more? Like, keep going with it. This is what you want. Don't stop. Keep going.
I love that. And it's so, and also like, it's not giving you the ocean. It's giving you drops because we probably can't handle the ocean immediately. So it's like, take what you need. And going back to your story, you needed something at one stage of your life. And then another stage of your life, you needed a different thing. And that's not to say that the other thing was no longer needed, but it's like, it's just all in stages. And
it was all at like, each part of it was a part of the journey that had to happen in order for the next part of it to happen, which is basically the story of the book. Like, he has to start out in, like, you have to start out, how can we say that? Like, what analogy, what metaphor can we use? like when they say like you have to crawl before you walk, before you run. Well, it's kind of like that. Like, if he hadn't started crawling, he would have never been able to walk, and then he would have never been able to run.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I'm Googling.
For people.
No, you're good. No, I mean, I'm trying to find the like the summary.
So I bet here it's on the back.
Okay, great.
So, here we go. This is the plot for everybody. I'll put on my best plot telling voice.
Please.
I don't have a plot telling voice.
No,
it's just my normal voice, everybody. Okay, so it says, this is the magical story of Santiago, a shepherd boy who dreams of traveling the world to seek the most wonderful treasures known to man. From his home in Spain, he journeys to the markets of, I'm not going to pronounce this right, Tangier, Tangiers, and from there into the Egyptian desert, where a fateful encounter with the alchemist awaits him. Coelho's fascinating storytelling, with its mixtures of spirituality, magical realism, and folklore, makes The Alchemist a story that will delight any reader and inspire us all to follow our dreams.
100%. Yes. Okay, we did nail it. People do know what the story is about now.
But there were no spoilers, because you can't have spoilers in the plot. So the plot description that they put on the book, they aren't going to say like, and he fails. No.
No, we didn't.
Can you imagine if they put like a huge spoiler in the plot and they're like, and the killer is
Oh my gosh. Well,
I don't need to read the book now.
That's how I feel about movies, because I've seen it somewhere that the trailer is just like a mini movie, and sometimes some people don't even want to watch the movie because they've already seen the trailer. So anyways, I just feel like that was a great synopsis of the book that had no spoilers, because people don't know what happened.
You got to read. You got to see what happens to Santiago along the way.
Yeah. And but going back to the Germany, so then what happened? Did you stay? Because now I'm invested in your story. Did you stay in Germany?
Did you got to read the? No, I don't have a book. But well, I should say that I was in Germany just on vacation. So I wasn't there living or anything. I was living in Spain at the time. I had taken a trip that was, just a little side trip, because I was teaching English at that time in Spain.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Wow.
And so I just didn't know where that was going to go.
Okay.
Continue. Was I going to go back to the United States? What was going to happen?
Okay. So then that's breadcrumbing. So why teaching English? How did that? Because I remember when I was in college or graduating, I was like, I want to teach English in Japan. And I applied and I didn't get in, but I have a friend who got into South Korea. So she did that experience. But yeah, how did that happen with Spain? I'd have no other questions besides that one. How did it happen?
Well, I studied journalism news editorial. So for writing. Okay. And I say that because a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, and you would have been on TV. And I'm like, well, no, because it was journalism.
Yeah.
So, I studied that in the university, and then I didn't know exactly what I would do when I finished. So I said, some people take like that gap year and they travel abroad or whatever. And I said, well, I'm going to go study in Costa Rica. Oh. And so that was my first alchemist adventure. That he found me there. And, So I went to Costa Rica, and what I did was, it was a study abroad volunteer program that they had through the study abroad company. And they chose what our volunteer thing would be. And the one they chose for me was to teach English.
Oh, wow.
And from that moment of teaching English in Costa Rica, I haven't stopped teaching English.
Oh my gosh.
That was really what paved the way.
Oh my
gosh. It was almost like it was decided for me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So so you started doing that for companies, and I think as a job, but then how did that transfer into an online business? Like, I think that decision sometimes where people say, you don't have to commodify everything. It could just be a hobby. It could just be something you just do. So how did that happen, that you decided, I want to be my own boss,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting what you said about it being a hobby, because sometimes people also comment like, you don't want to take your hobby and turn it into a job.
Right.
And I do think that this is a bit different for me, obviously, because my hobby isn't like learning English. Like, if I took the fact that I learned Spanish and tried to turn that into like teaching it, then maybe that would be stepping on the toes of a hobby. But
Okay.
But also, clearly, a lot of people do turn their hobbies into jobs, and
Yeah.
they're very happy and satisfied with it.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to touch on that because I just think
Yeah.
it's so funny when people say that and they're like, "Oh, you don't want to turn your hobby into a job." And I'm like, "But some people do. Some
Some
people do
people
want to
do.
turn it into their job,
That's
and
right.
other people don't." And like
Yeah.
you get to decide whether it's
Yeah.
meant for you or not. And I just, yeah, like, I just want to
Yeah.
throw that out there in case
Yeah.
somebody wants to turn their little
Yeah.
hobby into a job. Like maybe you should, maybe that is what you
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to do. But, so for English,
Yeah.
it actually ended up being, it's funny because it's almost like
Mhm.
there's outside forces at work because it was my husband
Okay.
who encouraged me
Oh,
to, because I had finished, I was teaching through different like ministries of education within
beautiful.
Spain,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they were different like student visas. And
Oh
then
my gosh.
I got married and I could then work on my own. I didn't have to do
Okay.
the student visa thing.
Got
And
it.
he's like, "Well, you have all these people who are coming to you asking for classes. Why
Yeah.
don't you just
Oh,
become self-employed through Spain
yeah.
and do that as your,"
Um,
and I said, "Why don't I?"
yeah. Yeah.
Why not?
I love that.
Yeah, so
Oh
that's how
my
it
gosh.
started.
Yeah,
Mm,
because it's hard to see ourselves. Like I think we're in something, and then it's like, oh yeah, I'm just doing this thing, or it's I'm going down this path. But the fact that the universe or other loved ones can see and not guide us, but give those nudges and hints, like
yeah, they're like,
that's
"Well,
awesome.
what about this?" And you're like, "Oh,
Yeah,
huh. What
yeah.
about that?"
Right,
Yeah.
right. And then you also being able to be brave and courageous to take that step, because I think it also would have been, actually, I'm okay. I don't want to do that, but you do. So then how has online business, being an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, a womanpreneur, like all these things,
Entrepreneur.
all these things,
Add anything to preneur.
all the things to the preneur. So how has that been then? Like changing it from working from, I guess, typical settings, working for someone else, and then being able to have the onus to, okay, I'm walking into being online business. So how has that been? And yeah.
It's been a lot of like getting your head on straight and
Mhm.
learning the ropes of things that you never, because it's not, if it was just teaching English, that would be
Yeah,
one thing, but it's
right,
not just teaching English.
right.
And I completely understand and respect people who have like the hobby that we were talking about
Right.
that are like, I just want to keep it a hobby. I
Yeah.
will continue cooking all these desserts for Tom, Jack, and Sally,
Right.
but I don't want to turn it into a job because I don't
Right.
want all that other stuff that I have
Yeah.
to do in order for it
Yeah.
to be a job. I just want to do the part of
Mm,
creating the desserts of,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
Z. And so I
Yeah.
completely, having been there, completely understand it. I don't know if the like the me added, depending
Mm,
on the year that it
yeah.
was, I don't know if
Yeah.
this always would have been the choice that I made.
Mm. So
Just
then,
like when I was saying about the book, like that when I
yeah,
read it at different times, I
yeah,
underline
yeah,
different things.
yeah,
Like I
yeah,
definitely think that different years of Vicky would have
yeah,
chosen, I mean, and did choose different paths. So
yeah. Yeah, and that's always the thing, I think, is no door, I think, is completely shut, because
mm,
something might change with time. But
yeah.
how did you start taking the small step to decide, okay, let me just try this online business thing? And then, because I remember my husband asking me, when is it ever going to be enough with business? And I was like, never, because I just want to be my own boss forever. So I just was like, I can't work for somebody else. I just, and maybe that's youth talking, I don't know, or just feeling that, like, the invincibility sometimes. But Yeah, I think some people, we do know what the path is or isn't, like work for somebody else and not have to deal. So I am not that person, clearly, but how did you start taking steps and like small risks, small in that direction of, okay, this could actually be a path that is for me, actually?
I don't think that I took small steps.
No?
I just
Okay.
like jumped in with both feet and
Yeah.
said, because my situation was that my student visa, my position that I had with my student visa, as a language assistant is what they called it. So it was basically like, I liked to think of it as being like the Robin to Batman, Batman being like the head teacher of the class. And so I got to be the sidekick and, and not have to grade exams and not have to punish students and just like, hey, let's talk in English. And I'm like, I love teaching. It's so easy. But so when that position ended, it was like, you need to find a job. You have to do something. You can't just be twiddling your thumbs here. And so that's, I think, why it was easier as well to just jump in with both feet. It's not like I didn't have anything to lose. I mean, I pretty much had everything to lose, but I didn't, I don't know, it didn't occur to me at the time. It was just like, this is what I'm doing. My husband says I can do it. Cool.
Got it,
I can do it. He thinks I can do it. I must be able to do it, right?
Yeah. And that says a lot, because I feel like sometimes when there is or isn't a safety net, like depending on how we have that savings backed up or whatever it is, but just, okay, I'm doing this. Maybe you have no choice. Maybe you're kind of being pushed a little bit, but ultimately you jumped. So what was helpful, I guess, for listeners out there who are in that maybe situation, who are looking to change jobs, looking to explore business? How would you say, like, to develop that, I can do this, or this person says I can do this? What are some things that are helpful or that you would recommend for people to kind of trust that, believe that? Yeah.
I'm trying to think back to those moments. Like what, I know that I did a lot of researching, like what makes how do you start a language academy if you're going to teach English? What's involved in it? What are all the ins and outs? And so I had all of these things that I Googled and printed off and took notes on, and so I just kind of like tried to fill my head with information. And all the while I was just, I had different students coming to me. And so I was working with this student and that student, and it was a mix of all different kinds of students. It wasn't anything like concrete. Like now I would tell you that I specifically work with adults and we focus on conversation and building confidence so that you can go out in the world and use English and make connections with people in whatever way you are wanting to do that, that you get to share yourself in English, that you aren't only using English with me in the classroom, that you're using it with the world. And like at that time, I was just testing it out, testing it with this group, testing it with this other group. And it was basically years of trial and error.
Wow. Yeah.
And doing it the most low cost way that I had available to me, because actually I didn't start out online. I guess the information that I'm actually sharing now that I think about it, no, it's okay, people. So I didn't start out teaching online. I started out teaching in person. And so I had the students coming to me, but like I had an online presence. So I was on Instagram, I was on socials, I had a website, but the people were coming to me and doing classes in my apartment where I lived.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so we had a room in our house, or in our apartment rather,
Yeah.
and they would come and they had to go through the whole entire apartment to get to this one little room in the back. And
Wow.
the pandemic, like it's horrible to say that like something good could come of it, but if you were to say that, the only thing that I could possibly say is that it's when I went fully online, because I was doing some classes online because there were people that I knew from other towns who couldn't come to
Right.
Keenan Center to, where I lived.
Right.
And so we would do the class on. I was like, well, we can do it online. They were like, oh, online? Is this possible? What is this? Like,
Right.
what is this witchcraft you speak of? But so little by little, people started getting familiar with, and why don't you send me an audio message on WhatsApp to practice between the classes? And they were like, what? I could do some speaking practice between the class with just a little message on a phone? And I'm like, you can.
Oh my God.
So it was almost like I was innovating my own classes little by little over the years, and the pandemic pushed that even more.
Yeah.
And that's what led it to be all online.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, because I think it's hard. I think I read somewhere about people who are trying to get to a health goal, and then they say, but willpower or motivation eventually fades. And so having a situation to like force you that there's this obligation outside of you, and the universe is telling you to do it, but like you have to do it. Wow, that's awesome.
You must say yes to the universe.
But always, even especially it doesn't sound like you knew where it was heading, but you took the road.
No idea. Yeah, you're exactly right. Because like I said, I was teaching a range of ages. So I had groups of younger kids in elementary school. I had individual classes with elementary school. I had all the way up to adults who were retiring. Like, ran the gamut of.
Oh, wow.
And I had some that I had one family that had like a little preschooler that I actually went to their house for the classes. But I mean, like, now which age group is my favorite?
I know.
No, we don't pick favorite. It's like with kids, we don't pick favorites. Or with the cats. My husband always asks me, which cat is your favorite? And I'm like, oh, cover their ears. Don't say that. Like, could you pick a favorite dog? No. I mean, there's always one that you say, like, comes to your head first, but you're like, no, I could never pick.
No, I am biased, but they already know. And I think they know just because one of the two, I have two small dogs for the listeners out there. One is a corgi and one is a French bulldog. So they're both little stout, short thingies. And I think one of them knows just because the other one always comes for the attention. It's the French bulldog. Her name is Luna, who always comes for it. So I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna give it to you. I'm gonna give you my attention. No problem. But I mean, emotionally, it's hard because we love and love is just so much.
You want to help everybody, and you want to give your love to everybody. And so.
Yeah. And the same with Spanish. I love what you said about being yourself or being able to express yourself in that, because I think that's the hardest thing. Is there's so much, I think, when learning language, the grammar or the technicality, but no one speaks that way. And us as English speakers, like, I couldn't tell you really you're conjugating this, like, I mean, no.
You're like, what did I just say? If you had to say it in grammatical terms, Vicky, it doesn't matter. Like, nobody cares at all. And the funny thing is, like, when I talk to my husband and I'm like, wait, you use subjunctive there? And he's like, did I? And he's like, oh, I guess I did. And so then I try and like analyze it out. And he's just like, yes, no. Like,
no,
pass.
Yes. Yeah. There's a few things I think It's interesting Spanish, and I think English and Spanish have this unique situation because Spanish in Latin America is so different than Spain's Spanish. I remember I had one Spanish teacher who spoke in the vosotros and all of this. And I was like, who are you?
Gosh.
I was like, somebody help. But then every dialect in different Latin American countries are so different, but everybody holds on to this. I'm like, everybody shut up, because I mean,
Yes,
I mean,
as if you don't have your own thing that you do that's special.
Yes, and English is the same, because I love hearing the British speak, and then they have their own dialects too. If you're like from Liverpool or Manchester and Australian, and I'm like, good heavens, like there's so many. So like, what is the language now? It's just a continuous evolution.
Yeah, and then I often remind people, you really need to think about who are you going to be using your English with, because this plays a big part in the way that you need to learn certain things. Like, for example, basketball, the sport, basketball.
Right.
There are students who legitimately do not believe me that it's basketball and it's not basket, the sport. And I'm like, no, it's really called basketball. And they're like, no, it's not. And I'm like, no, it is. And so I'm like, I'm not going to get into a big debate about it, but it is called basketball. And although you might call it basket, and that sounds like it would be an English word, it doesn't mean that it is the term that we would commonly use. Right. And that's to say, are you going to be speaking English with, in this case, other Spanish people? Is that going to be the majority of people that you're speaking with? Do they all say basket? Is it necessary for you to learn the term basketball? It might not be. You might not need it. It might not matter to you at all.
I love that.
So I just like, sometimes it's like, do you need to be so picky about things? And I'm really not. I'm much more laid back about it than I used to be. And this is the years of experience, because it's much more important that the information that you are trying to transmit is transmitted and understood with by the other person, and you're able to have a conversation, because that's what the goal is, to communicate with somebody.
I love that. Yeah. No, thank you for that. Yeah, because I mean, I've told this to so many people. I want to be I think it's trilingual. I want to speak French is my main thing.
French is what I'm learning.
Oh my gosh, yes. We should be French.
We're gonna be like language learning sisters.
Yes, we should. Oh my gosh, great. Okay, well, after this podcast, I will reach out to you for that. But but you know, all of these, where I was going was the language apps, the Duolingo, the Rosetta Stone. And what you just said about, we're just trying to communicate, to knowing who our audience is, and how we're like that. I've never heard that in any of this language speaking world, because or like language learning world, because
that's the biggest reason that it came to me, is because with the like European Union, when they go and like have their meetings together, and I don't know a lot about politics. I'm not real. Excuse my lack of correct terminology and whatnot, but so long as I'm transmitting the general idea and you understand,
we're getting it. Yes.
You're getting the message. And so we're talking about like all these different countries coming together, choosing English as the universal language that they're speaking in. And what ends up happening, that they are speaking a sort of, I don't remember what term they used, but, is it like international English? There's a term for it. Excuse me that I can't think of it right now, but we'll just say international English, or, European English. I don't know. I don't remember what it's called. But the point being that they might say something that I would be like, oh, that sounds kind of weird to my ear. That doesn't sound like how I would say it. Like, that's not maybe as natural sounding or as common for me to say, but all of these other people are saying it, and they all understand each other. So I'm just going to sit back, and I still understood them. Does it really matter at the end of the day? Well, no, it doesn't. And
Yeah.
that's like sometimes when we go and we change or correct people. Oh my gosh. The
Yes.
people that correct in
Yes.
comments, they're like,
Oh my
it
gosh.
was like friends. It was
Yeah.
YOU apostrophe RE, not YOUR. Like, okay, did you need to let somebody in the
Right.
comments know that
Right.
was that a nice comment?
Yes.
Let's think
No,
about
exactly. Yeah. And language is so important because it's how else are we communicating verbally, in text, and then these little nuances, like you said, like
Yeah.
where's the empathy, where is the like
Yeah,
we got
empathy
the
does not
message.
exist in comments on Instagram.
No, never.
We've lost it. We've lost the sense of, because this
Yeah.
anonymity has given us like
Yes.
a distance from what we're saying.
I mean,
And
yeah.
so then the empathy, as you said, is
Yeah.
lost. Yeah.
Yeah. And
But, sorry.
yeah. Oh, no, please go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to touch on what you said about the different language learning apps, because
Yes.
I actually use Duolingo, and I know people are like, what? How dare you, teacher?
Yeah, I know.
I used to poop all over Duolingo and be like, only because the reason that I was so down on it was because I lost my streak once and I got super angry. And it was all because I was flying back to Nebraska, and that overseas flight made the like midnight cutoff. And I was like, this isn't fair. I had 100 days. And so I deleted the app from my life. And it was, I don't know, maybe like a year ago or something that I got back into it because my sister started using it. And so now we kind of like compete with each other sometimes and whatnot. So it's more for fun and just to like robot through it. But but I do think that from my own like perspective as a teacher, it is good for me to use the app so that I can share with my students, like, okay, I use it. Here's how you can benefit more from it. Because I know that I just kind of like I said, robot through. Have you ever used Duolingo?
A little bit, yeah, but I couldn't get that whole day straight. It's overwhelming for me. I'm like, just let me take my time, but I haven't used it. Yeah. I like some of the little games that they have, like little matching things. So I just go in, I do a little matching game, call it a day. And how much did I learn? Well, probably not that much. And so like, if you actually want to get value for it, then you really have to slow down and take notes or repeat the things verbally, or like in my humble opinion, you can't just use the app on its own as it is. You have to do the extra work to get to, especially if you want to see progress with your language learning. And I mean, this is true with what I was saying before about like, if you want to build your own business, you want to go out on your own, like you can read all the things that you want, but you have to take different action steps in connection to that as well. You can't ever just rely on information coming in, eating through it and like, okay, it's all just going to work out. Like, no.
You have to take action, people, in different ways for different things, but you have to take action.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the hardest part, because I think like in school, it's like, oh, you just learn things in a bubble, in a hypothesis that, okay, this is great to know. And then, oh, that too. And language exists and communication is a skill. Like, I will eventually get a job, and like all of these things just exist floating around. But until we tether them to reality, actually take the steps and take the risk, and it might even be trusting our loved ones, like something that is tangible. I think that gets really hard because it's easy. Like I tell so many people, I used to be a self-help junkie, recovering self-help book junkie. I read all the stuff. I can be better. I can get, but then when is it enough? How am I applying it? How do I know that it?
There you have it.
Apply to me, like all these things. It's hard.
Well, and even like I mentioned that I underlined this stuff in the book, and then I said, "Oh, I didn't even remember what I had underlined. It's been so many years since I saw it."
I know.
Like we
And
all
that's,
do it.
yeah.
And we all know as well. And so that's why sometimes we need to
Mhm.
have like a career coach to help us, like you, or we need to
Mhm.
have an English teacher, such as
Yeah.
myself, to like
Yeah.
you. That's why that guide and that accountability
Yes. Yes.
holder is
Yes.
so helpful
Yes.
in pushing
100%.
you along.
Yes. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. And that's a great segue because I wanted to ask, well, I have two more questions, but one is where can people find you, work with you, learn more about your work?
Well, they can find me anywhere. No, but I do have like, if you look for Vicky Kelty, and it's Vicky spelled Vickie.
Okay.
If you look for Vicky, I suppose I can spell my last name too, Kelty.
Yeah.
So if you look for Vicky Kelty, if you look for me over on Instagram or on Twitter or on, I'm everywhere.
Yes. Yes. Awesome. And then
Yeah.
my last question is what advice, insights, experience, books, I don't know if we want to do the book route, would you give someone who's in this kind of lost limbo, either the business piece, either the career piece, but what would you recommend somebody who's trying to figure it out? Yeah.
So a couple of things.
Okay.
One thing that for me really helped with my teaching with language, with teaching, I was going to say with teaching language learning, with teaching English.
Yeah.
Well, and even with my own language learning, but
Yeah.
so with teaching English was to kind of like remember the positive people that had impacted my life.
Mm.
And because I had so many amazing teachers in middle school and high school, my middle school Latin teacher, which was the first like
Wow.
big significant language class that I had. And then the 3 Spanish teachers that I had in, four. Oops. Sorry, Mrs. Vanderslice. Senora Vanderslice. Woo. Oh my gosh. I failed on 2 parts now. So those 4 teachers also really impacted my life in such a good way that they were my inspiration to like do this and to do it in a way that I could leave that same mark that they left on me. And so like, if you have somebody that it doesn't mean that like, it has to be, oh, they were a really good chef. And so that means you have to be a chef. But what I mean is that like, they were inspirational and they impacted your life for whatever reason they did. Can you use that to support you and encourage you? Because like we talked about that my husband had said was my encouragement. And we don't all have that. We don't all have an actual person right here with us who is doing that. But I bet that I hope that we can all find one person from our lives that at some point affected them in a positive way, that we can be like, that person is the one that's like my light that is keeping me like going.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I would say is that, so when I was in the university, I guess I would probably say with 100%, like I feel 100% sure that if we were to go back to Vicky in the university and say, Vicky, where do you see yourself in 2024? She would have no idea that I would be in Spain teaching English, having a conversation on Raquel's podcast. Like she would never, she'd be like, what's a podcast, Vicky? And she's like, how are you going to do it over the seas? What?
Right. We just mailing each other.
She's like, I thought you went into news editorial. Why are you talking on a microphone? You should have gone into the broadcast journalism. No, but I think it's just really interesting to think about that. we just have no idea. Like, you just have no idea. And if you ask me where I'll be 10 years from now, I could make guesses. And I'm sure Vicky back then made a lot of guesses that were probably not accurate. And maybe my path is clearer now because I have this career with teaching English that I've been doing for a number of years. I mean, so I taught in Costa Rica in 2006. So, I mean, I'm aging myself. Don't do the math, people. Don't do the math.
No, we're not doing
English
math.
class.
This is not a math podcast.
So I just, I don't know. I leave you with that you just have no idea. And the last thing, so I said I had a couple. The last thing is I have the one last quote that is actually like right towards the beginning of the book, but it says, and I want to leave you this because I hope you find it also inspiring, is it's the possibility of having a dream come true that makes life interesting.
That's it. We have nothing else to add. We're leaving it there. I love it. Thank you so much, Vicky, for being on the podcast. Everyone who's listening, please, in the show notes, you'll find all her links. If you want to work with her, learn more about her work. And we'll hope to have you again on the podcast soon. Thank you so much, Vicky.